Hello, everyone. I have a question for you. What if the very first major effort for economic empowerment for the formerly enslaved people had actually succeeded? That's a question that we're going to discuss, and I hope you will join us for this discussion in this month of Juneteenth. And as we preview an upcoming event in Gainesville, Florida, it is an economic development empowerment workshop sponsored by the NAACP that will be this Saturday starting at 9:30 at GTech, the Gainesville Technology and Entrepreneurship Building. The question again, what if the first major effort to create economic empowerment for formerly enslaved people had actually succeeded? Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela D. Marshall, Peace Ambassador. And you might ask, how do you become a Peace Ambassador, Pamela? Well, I have a better question for you. Why are you not a Peace Ambassador yourself? It really is a decision because the peace that we long for the world actually belong inside of us. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Peace and Healing, our Peace and Healing community. How different this United States of America would look today if those efforts that were put in place for the 40 acres for African Americans after the Emancipation Proclamation had remained in effect. And what I want you to understand about that is that was a direct order that there would be 400,000 acres set aside for the newly released released from bondage African Americans. And after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, of course, you know the story, that was overturned. And those families who had already been granted land were forced to leave the land. But what that tells us, or what it should tell us, is about public policy, because public policy as we see it today is the same public policy that reversed that decision about the 40 acres. I think sometimes we hear that so much 40 acres and a mule that we think that it was just something that was being said. No, that was an order that was read that was supposed to happen because Frederick Douglass, Frederick Douglass is the one that met with President Abraham Lincoln and said to free the slaves because the North was losing the war. Free the slaves and recruit the black freedmen into the Union Army. Well, his advice was ignored until the military situation was so deteriorated that Lincoln agreed. He proclaimed emancipation and welcomed the free blacks into the Union Army, and that is why the North won the war. So it was put in place to help people who were being released from bondage, but they had nothing. That's public policy. And I think we're where we are today because we have failed to understand that any policy that is put in place can be taken out of place. And that happens so quickly within a matter of months. Newly freed African Americans were getting land, and some of them had started to work the land. So public policy shapes uh, economic opportunities. And that's why public policy is your business. It is all of our businesses. Whether we own a business or not, public policy really is your business. This whole notion of limiting access to voting is for a reason, because that is public policy. That's a policy that's being implemented. And have you ever thought about it? How many times have you looked at certain neighborhoods and wondered, why does this neighborhood have sidewalks and street lights and grocery stores and thriving businesses while another neighborhood struggles to attract investment? Well, the answer is really clear. It's not about luck. It's not about having infrastructure, because public policy helps to direct funding for infrastructure. The reason that you see the big difference is because of public policy. It's simply made by the government, by the local governments that affect the lives and how we live, how we work, how we learn, how we build businesses, how we create wealth. That's where public policy comes in. Public policy determines that. And I think we have too few, we don't have enough conversations about it. We talk about a lot of things, but I don't think we've had in depth conversation about the policies that determine where roads are built. I used to work for the Tennessee Department of Transportation, and local governments had an opportunity to put together their wish list of what they want to see built. And more times than not, people of color don't recognize what is happening when that discussion is had. So we don't come to those meetings. So when you don't come to those meetings, because let me tell you, if they decide to put a road through through an area, that means some other decisions are being made about what economic development is going to be put around those roads. They're not just building roads for nothing. And we're not a part of the discussions. We don't go to those meetings. Which schools are going to receive resources? When there was such a push for desegregation, it was more from the Black community perspective, it was more about give our schools the same resources. We don't have to go to school with you. But one of the schools here, which I think happened probably across the country, African American school, it was the community that came together that had to build um, a lunchroom. They had a building to have classes, but it was the community that came together and did the landscaping and put in a kitchen because the resources were not there. The resources were being directed other places. As I have lived in communities across the country, it is very interesting to see just crossing one street, everything changes. Now, if tax dollars are available to mow the grass on this section of the roadway, why are tax dollars not available to mow the grass the rest of the way of a particular roadway? But notice that that's called public policy. How businesses are regulated. As a vice president of public policy and legislative affairs for the Greater Memphis Chamber, those organizations came about because it was a quasi nonpartisan group of businessmen who were helping to impact the policies that impact their communities. That's public policy. When people say, I don't want to get involved in politics, you already are. You're involved in it, but you're not making any decisions. You're just the recipient of decisions that are made by other people. What housing gets developed? That's public policy. That's not by happenstance. They're planning and zoning boards. And many of these boards in the communities where you live, they have open positions where community members can be a part of these boards and organizations. So if you don't know that, I'm telling you that now. That is a way that you can get involved and find out more about public policy that's happening in your area, where public transportation goes. I have heard many stories. Hello, and thank you so much for watching. I've heard many stories about um, moms trying to get their children to school, and especially if you have younger children. You have one that you have to get to daycare, you have one that you have to get to one school, one that you have to get to another school. And moms, people who are trying to go to work, may be standing in an area where there's a bus stop, but there's no covering. Who's making that decision? And do you understand that you have the right to go to your city council, your city commission, your county commission, and find out exactly why a bus stop in your area is not covered? Who's receiving economic incentives? It is said over and over again that small businesses across the the United States of America, create the majority of the jobs. Small business owners. That's why public policy is your business. Um, who gets those investments? Well, the larger companies usually get those investments because they have people who are employed as lobbyists, as people whose responsibility is to cultivate relationships with elected officials. Whether you realize it or not, public policy touches every part of your life. The tax incentives, economic development is political. Many people think that economic development is about attracting businesses, but economic development is really about decisions. Who gets the contracts? Who gets access to capital? Who receives grants? Who gets infrastructure improvement? Who gets broadband access? Who gets workforce training opportunities? Who sits at the table when decisions are made? These are political decisions, and political decisions become economic realities. And my sisters and brothers, the cost of being absent when communities are absent from public policy conversations, decisions are still going to be made. We're not there, but decisions are being made. So the question is not whether decisions will be made. Those decisions are going to be made. The question is who will be influencing them. And if you're not in the room, you may find yourself as part of the menu. Because listen, it is said many times we want to be at the table. Well, I'm going to challenge that today because I have been a part of too many conversations and too many meetings where decisions are made and then they bring it to the table. My encouragement to you is to become a part of the kitchen. You need to be in the kitchen, not at the table. Because once they bring it to the table, many times it's already done. You might get to put a little pepper or salt on it or something. But for the most part, it is already done. So please, we need to stop saying we want a seat at the table and we need to start getting in the kitchen of where public policy is being made, where those decisions are being shaped. Because just coming to the table, my dear friends, my sisters and brothers, many times it's too late. Look where we are today because we have been encouraged to get a seat at the table. That's not close enough to the decisions, just being at the seat. Economic justice has never been separate from civil rights or voting rights or fair housing or equal education, employment protection, access to capital. They're all public policy decisions. These are public policy issues. All are economic issues, and they all require your engagement. Civic engagement is you. And so there are three ways that citizens can influence economic development. What is the number one way? Can you tell me for us to influence economic development? Vote. And voting is not simply selecting candidates. Voting is selecting policies. We are encouraged to get registered, and I hope you are registered to vote. If you're not registered, please register and vote. We have elections coming up in communities across the country. You need to realize the sacrifices, the people who died, the people who were beaten, the people who took injuries to their graves so that you could vote. Every election affects economic priorities. It's not just about who's getting in there. It's about those decisions that are going to be made once they're there. I would like to see a show of hands. How many have ever attended a city council meeting or a county commission meeting or a school board meeting or a planning and zoning meeting? If you think you don't have time to attend those meetings, That is where you are missing out on decisions that are being made, because those decisions are decisions that are made before they ever even appear on the ballot. Yeah, uh, I so wish that there were more of us who understood, and that's why we're doing this, is because I want you to understand that public policy is your business. And I had one person who was running for office, and he said those who contribute to my campaign uh, in the primary, they get the contracts. Those who contribute in the general election, they get the thank you notes. If we never believed that those who contribute to campaigns have a better chance of that elected official answering the phone when they're elected, we are seeing it played out in living color in what's going on right now. That has always happened. It just has never been that blatant and that excessive. There are people who make it a point to make a donation to everybody that's running. Doesn't even have to be a sizable donation. But if you're in business and you don't have some money to give to campaigns, then you are just at the mercy, and you got to stand in line behind the people who did make donations. I'm just telling you what's true. It's about relationships. Economic development happens through relationships. Who's going to get the contracts? Do you even know who your elected officials are? Do you know anything about your chamber of commerce in your area? You need to know the economic development organizations, know your local planning processes. And I'm not just talking to people that are in business. We don't have any more time to play. Every person in every community today, we need to make this more of a priority than anything else. I'm not talking about your spiritual life, but we make time to do things that may not net us anything because those things are being used as a distraction. Please understand that there are things that every citizen should know about. You should know about the benefits. You should know about who's missing when decisions are made, um, who's going to profit from a decision that's made, who's being left behind of decisions that's made. As I've worked in communities across the country, let me tell you something that's common. Let me tell you the common thread in every community across the country. When grants are made, when you fill out that grant, you have to show a need. Where is the need? The need is generally in the communities of people that are Black and brown. That's where the need is. Those statistics are used to get the funding, but if you look at who gets hired to administer the grants, those grants, it doesn't look like the people whose statistics they use to get the money. All colleges and universities are using the statistics in the poor Black communities and brown communities because you have to show a need. They get millions of dollars every year. So who's profiting and who's being left behind? Those are questions that we need to ask and seek the answers, because otherwise nothing is going to change. And then who made the decisions? That matters too. We say government, but government is just made up of people who get elected or people who are staffing the positions in these offices. Um, and then go and ask, how can I participate? How can you participate other than passively watching the news, passively seeing things that are happening, and you're not aware of even how it happened? My sisters and brothers, the goal is not simply to understand public policy. The goal of this is to help you understand that you have the power to influence public policy. You have the power to influence public policy. Every resident has a voice. Every business owner has a voice. Every faith leader has a voice. Every voter has a voice. The future of our communities will not be determined by those who choose to use their votes alone. We got to use our voice. We got to put some work behind our talk. Closing the economic development is not something that happens to us. It is something we help create, and we help create it whether we're there or not. So if we're not there, it gets done and we don't know about it. And if we are there, we get to say, wait a minute, I don't think that's a good idea. Wait a minute, I don't think that the community knew that this was about to happen. And can we table this until we let other people in the community know what is going on and how this is being shaped? Public policy shapes opportunities. Opportunities, those opportunities help to create prosperity. And what does prosperity do to our communities? It helps strengthen the community. And that's why public policy is not somebody else's business. It is our business. It is our business. So I want you to think today, and if you're just joining us, I hope you will go back and look at the beginning of this. Um, the road to economic freedom is paved with participation. The policies that we ignore today become the realities we live with tomorrow. Look at what is happening with the redistricting across the country. That is public policy. That is determining whether or not we may be headed back to having to count the beans in the jar before we can vote. Public policy shapes everything in your community. And plainly put, public policy are the rules that parents lay down in the house. But once you get in government, it's called public policy. It becomes the realities that we live with tomorrow. Public policy is your business because our business, my dear friends, is our future. I hope that you will join us this Saturday for an event that is sponsored by the Alachua County NAACP. The Alachua County NAACP, led by Patricia Lee, with this event um, Saturday at 9:30 at the Gainesville Technology and Entrepreneurship Center. If you don't have one of these happening in your area, I strongly suggest that you sit down, whether it's with this group, whether it's with your church, um, the sororities and fraternities. We have to start talking more about public policy and how it impacts every aspect of our lives. We can be very in tune to some other things that are happening. I like to call them distractions, mere distractions. And while we're distracted by something that does not matter, all of the things that do matter are continuing to happen in our community. Public policy is your business. Um, as I talked about at the top of the hour, top of the show, wasn't an hour. The policy to give the newly freed slaves, that was public policy that said that they would be granted the 40 acres. The mule part got added on because the military had some surplus horses from the war and they gave to them. But the land, imagine the difference, what our community would look like today if that policy, if that order had been honored. And because it was not honored, there were so many things that happened from taking the land away to the Reconstruction ending, Jim Crow laws suppressing voting, economic opportunities being suppressed, redlining and discrimination for housing, and limited home ownership, and Voting Rights Act of 1965 got put in place, but it's being threatened today because of public policy. I just want you to understand something. Economic development is not just about jobs and businesses. While it is about jobs and business, it's not just about jobs and businesses. It is about the policies that determine who gets access to land, to money, capital, who gets access to contracts, education, and where infrastructure is going to be put in place. It's about political power. Public policy is your business because public policy shapes economic development. I do thank you very much for joining me for this episode. This is so important to me because what has happened with us, we we went to sleep. We fell asleep. We thought we had made it because we were able to trade in the cotton sack and get a credit card. But what we did was overlook the fact that the credit card put us in another form of sharecropping. Credit cards, hear me, credit cards and paying interest has put us in another form of sharecropping. And let me tell you, that is public policy as well. Because initially, nobody could get a credit card but business people. And when they decided to make it available to the masses and tack on sinfully high interest rates, and I say that because the Bible calls interest a usury tax, and it calls it a sin because the scripture says, "Oh, no man." But we traded in the cotton sacks and got credit cards, and we thought all was well. And we thought that was economic prosperity. That was another form of sharecropping that came about through public policy. Payday loan places, that was public policy. And I believe that first legislation was passed in the state of Tennessee and has spread across the country and has been a poison dropped in low income communities right next to the liquor store. And we are suffering as a result of it. And it's public policy. How do you change that? Do you know who your elected officials are? Make it a point to attend meetings. Make it a point to support those who are running for office. Make it a point to learn enough that you are interested in stepping in this arena where policies are being made. Public policy is your business. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to continuing these conversations so that we can educate each other, so that we can learn, so that we can thrive, so that we can grow. I'm Pamela D. Marshall, Peace Ambassador with At the Wellness Radio TV and the Peace and Healing Community. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, peace takes practice, and there is healing at the well. There is healing at the well. I love this.
Loving and harmonious life at the Wellness Radio TV.
Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you next time. Go back and look at the whole show. There is and there is healing.
There's healing at the well.
At the well. Thank you so much for joining me.